Hi guys, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you find this content informative, please subscribe to the channel for more updates. For months, the debate around Caitlin Clark seemed impossible to escape. Every game sparked a new argument. Every highlight created another controversy. Some fans believed they were witnessing the arrival of a generational talent. Others insisted the hype had gone too far. Sports shows talked about her. Social media argued about her. Critics questioned whether her success would truly translate to the professional level. And through all the noise, one question kept hanging over the basketball world. Was Caitlin Clark really as good as her supporters claimed? Then something happened that changed the conversation overnight. No press conference, no television interview, no carefully planned media campaign, just one of the greatest basketball minds the sport has ever seen sitting down, watching the footage and coming to his own conclusion. Because when LeBron James speaks about basketball, people listen differently. This isn't just a superstar giving another athlete a compliment. This is someone who has spent more than 2 decades studying greatness at the highest level. Someone who has played against legends, won championships, broken records, and developed a reputation for recognizing elite talent before the rest of the world catches up. So when LeBron publicly reacted to Caitlin Clark, it wasn't treated like another opinion. It felt like a verdict. Almost immediately, fans began asking the same question. What exactly did LeBron see that convinced him? Was it the deep three-pointers, the impossible passes, the ability to take over games under pressure, or was it something much bigger that most people had completely missed? Because the truth is, this story isn't just about a highlight reel. It's about a rookie who walked into one of the toughest situations in professional sports, faced criticism from every direction, and kept proving people wrong. And what happened next may have permanently changed the way Caitlin Clark is viewed forever. Long before she stepped onto a WNBA court, Caitlin Clark was already doing something that almost nobody thought was possible. She wasn't just winning games, she was turning women's college basketball into must-watch television. Everywhere Iowa played, arenas filled up, ticket prices skyrocketed, television ratings shattered expectations. Fans who had never watched a women's basketball game suddenly found themselves tuning in just to see what Clark would do next. And more often than not, she delivered moments that felt impossible. Deep three-pointers from several feet beyond the arc, no-look passes threaded through defenders, fourth-quarter performances that seemed to get bigger as the pressure increased. The numbers were staggering. Clark became the highest-scoring player in NCAA Division I history, surpassing records that many believed would never be touched. But what made her rise so unusual wasn't just the statistics. It was the way she played. Her style felt different, faster, bolder, more entertaining. Every possession carried the feeling that something spectacular might happen. Yet despite all the excitement, not everyone was convinced. Many basketball insiders warned fans not to get carried away. College dominance, they argued, doesn't automatically translate to professional success. The WNBA was a completely different challenge. Bigger, stronger, more experienced defenders would be waiting. The shots that looked easy in college might suddenly become difficult. The passing lanes might disappear. The freedom she enjoyed at Iowa could vanish against elite competition. At first, those concerns sounded reasonable. History was filled with great college players who struggled after turning professional. But what nobody realized was that Caitlin Clark wasn't following the typical path. She wasn't just becoming another talented rookie entering the league. She was becoming something much bigger, a player capable of changing the entire conversation around women's basketball. And once that process began, there was no turning back. The moment Caitlin Clark entered the WNBA, the conversation changed. The excitement that followed her from college didn't disappear, it intensified. Every game was analyzed. Every mistake became a headline. Every success sparked another debate. Instead of enjoying the normal learning curve that most rookies experience, Clark stepped into an environment where millions of people were watching her every move. What happened next surprised even some of her biggest supporters. From the opening weeks of the season, Clark faced a level of physical play that immediately became a talking point across the basketball world. Hard screens, aggressive defensive pressure, and constant attempts to disrupt her rhythm became regular features of her games. Fans argued about whether she was being targeted. Critics pushed back, saying this was simply how professional basketball works. The debate quickly spread beyond the court and into television studios, podcasts, and social media feeds. At the same time, expectations were reaching impossible levels. Some people expected Clark to dominate from day one. Others were waiting for proof that the college superstar would struggle against elite competition. Every performance seemed to be treated as evidence for one side or the other. And while all of this was happening, Clark still had to learn how to be a professional. New teammates, new systems, faster defenses, stronger opponents. The challenges were real, and like every rookie, she made mistakes. But unlike most rookies, her mistakes were magnified under a spotlight that never seemed to turn off. What made the situation even more intense was that the discussion stopped being just about basketball. Clark had become the center of a much larger cultural conversation involving media attention, league growth, and the future of women's sports. The pressure was enormous, but as the season continued, something unexpected began to happen. The very challenges that many believed would expose her weaknesses were slowly revealing just how dangerous she could become. For months, critics insisted that the hype surrounding Caitlin Clark would eventually collide with reality. They argued that professional defenses would expose weaknesses that college opponents couldn't. They predicted that once the excitement faded, the numbers would come back down to earth. But that's not what happened. As the season progressed, Clark started producing performances that became increasingly difficult to explain away. The same skills that made her a sensation in college began showing up against the best players in the world. The deep shooting range was still there. The court vision was still there. And perhaps most importantly, her confidence never seemed to disappear, even during the toughest stretches of the season. Then the records started falling. Clark began posting stat lines rarely seen from a rookie guard. She piled up assists at a pace that forced defenses to pick their poison. Focused too much on stopping her scoring, and she would pick apart the defense with pinpoint passes. Give her even a small amount of space and she could change a game with a single shooting streak. Night after night, the evidence continued to grow. What made these performances even more impressive was the attention she attracted from opposing teams. Clark wasn't catching anyone by surprise. Defenses were specifically preparing for her. Coaches built game plans around slowing her down. Yet despite being the focal point of every scouting report, she continued finding ways to impact games. And the impact extended far beyond the box score. Attendance numbers surged whenever her team visited a city, television ratings climbed, merchandise sales exploded. Arenas that had never sold out suddenly found themselves packed with fans hopping to witness the phenomenon in person. The conversation was no longer just about potential, it was about results. The narrative that Clark was merely a product of college hype was becoming harder to defend. Because with every game, every record, and every packed arena, the numbers kept telling the same story. And not everyone was happy about what that story revealed. By this point, the conversation around Caitlin Clark was no longer just about points, assists, or wins. Something much bigger was happening. What began as a basketball debate was turning into a cultural battle, with different groups seeing Clark's rise through completely different lenses. On one side were fans who believed they were watching a once-in-a-generation talent transform the sport. They pointed to the ratings, the sold-out arenas, the record-breaking performances, and the millions of new viewers tuning into women's basketball for the first time. To them, Clark's impact was undeniable. But on the other side, a different conversation was taking shape. Some observers argued that the attention surrounding Clark was overshadowing other talented players across the league. Others questioned whether the media's focus had become disproportionate. Discussions about recognition, opportunity, and visibility started appearing alongside conversations about basketball itself. Suddenly, every highlight, interview, and television segment seemed to spark another round of debate. Social media only made the situation more intense. Every big performance created thousands of reactions. Every tough game generated criticism. Fans defended Clark passionately while critics pushed back just as strongly. The result was a non-stop cycle of arguments that often had very little to do with what was actually happening on the court. What's fascinating is that this level of resistance often appears when an athlete begins changing the status quo. History is filled with examples of players who challenged expectations and faced skepticism before receiving widespread acceptance. When someone arrives and immediately attracts unprecedented attention, not everyone is comfortable with the shift. Meanwhile, Clark kept doing the one thing she could control, playing basketball. She rarely engaged with the noise. She didn't spend her time responding to every criticism or defending every headline. Instead, she continued showing up, competing, and letting her performances speak for themselves. And while the debates continued to grow louder, an unexpected voice was about to enter the conversation, one that even the harshest critics couldn't easily dismiss. So what was it that caught LeBron James' attention? Most fans immediately focused on the obvious things: the deep three-pointers, the flashy passes, the highlight plays that spread across social media within minutes. Those moments are spectacular, but for someone like LeBron, that's rarely the first thing he notices. Great players see the game differently. When LeBron watches basketball, he's not simply watching where the ball goes. He's studying decisions. He's looking at how quickly a player processes information. He's paying attention to the tiny details that casual viewers often miss. The split-second reads, the timing of a pass, the ability to recognize an opening before it actually appears. And that's exactly where Caitlin Clark stands out. Watch her closely, and you'll notice that many of her best plays begin several seconds before the ball leaves her hands. She reads defenders before they commit. She identifies mismatches before the defense realizes they're vulnerable. What looks like an impossible pass is often the result of seeing the play develop before anyone else on the floor. Then there's her shooting. Many players can make difficult shots. Very few can consistently create them under pressure. Clark doesn't just shoot from extraordinary range, she forces defenses to guard areas of the court that most players never threat. That changes everything. Defenders have to pick her up earlier. Help defenders are forced out of position. Entire defensive schemes become distorted simply because she's standing on the floor. But perhaps the most important thing LeBron likely recognized was something that can't easily be measured. Confidence. Not the loud kind, not the attention-seeking kind. The quiet belief that remains steady regardless of circumstances. Whether Clark is coming off a huge game or a difficult loss, she continues making the same aggressive reads and taking the same high-pressure shots. Elite competitors understand how rare that mindset truly is. And once LeBron recognized those traits, the conversation stopped being about hype. It became about greatness. What happened next wasn't a press conference, it wasn't a television special, it wasn't even a lengthy analysis. It was something much simpler. LeBron James publicly acknowledged Caitlin Clark's talent. In a sports world flooded with hot takes and endless opinions, that might not sound like a major event. But this wasn't just another celebrity posting on social media. This was one of the greatest players in basketball history, offering recognition to a player whose every achievement had been debated from the moment she entered the spotlight. And the reaction was immediate. Fans who had supported Clark from the beginning saw it as confirmation of what they had been saying for years. Across social media, clips of LeBron's comments spread rapidly. Basketball communities exploded with discussion. Sports shows picked up the story. Suddenly, people who had never watched a full Caitlin Clark game were asking what had convinced LeBron to speak out. But the most interesting reaction wasn't what people said. It was what many people didn't say. For months, critics had confidently argued that Clark's popularity exceeded her actual basketball ability. Others insisted that her success was being exaggerated by media coverage. But when someone with LeBron's basketball resume publicly recognized her talent, continuing those same arguments became much more difficult. After all, disagreeing with a fan is easy. Disagreeing with one of the smartest basketball minds the sport has ever produced is a different challenge entirely. That doesn't mean every debate disappeared overnight. Discussions about Clark, the WNBA, and the future of the sport continued, but the center of gravity shifted. The conversation moved away from whether Clark belonged at the highest level and toward how far she could go. And that's what made the moment so powerful. LeBron didn't create Caitlin Clark's greatness. He didn't give her talent, her records, or her impact on the game. He simply recognized what was already there. And once that recognition happened, it became much harder for the rest of the basketball world to ignore it. The most remarkable part of Caitlin Clark's story isn't the records she's broken. It's the ripple effect she's creating throughout the entire sport. For years, women's basketball had been growing steadily, building a loyal audience and producing elite talent. But Clark's arrival accelerated that growth in a way few people predicted. Suddenly, games that once attracted niche attention were becoming national events. Fans who had never followed the WNBA were buying tickets, watching broadcasts, and learning the names of players across the league. The numbers told the story. Attendance surged wherever Clark played, road arenas sold out. Television audiences reached levels that league executives could only dream about a few years earlier. Merchandise flew off shelves. Sports networks devoted more coverage to women's basketball than ever before. Whether people supported Clark or criticized her, they were paying attention. And attention changes everything. More viewers mean larger television deals. Larger television deals mean greater investment. Greater investment creates more opportunities for players, teams, and future generations. That's why Clark's impact extends far beyond her individual statistics. She's helping bring new eyes to an entire sport. Perhaps even more important is the effect she's having on young athletes. Across the country, girls are stepping onto basketball courts after watching Clark launch deep threes and make impossible passes. They aren't just seeing a successful player, they're seeing new possibilities. They're realizing that women's basketball can command the same excitement, discussion, and cultural relevance that many once believed was reserved for other sports. Of course, Clark isn't responsible for building the game alone. Countless players laid the foundation long before she arrived. Legends helped create the opportunities that exist today, but every era has a player who pushes the sport into a new chapter. For many fans, Caitlin Clark is becoming that player. And if her career continues on its current path, years from now people may look back and realize that this wasn't simply the rise of a superstar. It was the moment women's basketball entered an entirely new era.
If you made it this far, you already know this story is far from over. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think this changes everything, or are people overreacting? Hit the like button if you enjoyed this breakdown. It really helps push videos like this out to more viewers. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next update, because things are moving fast and there's a lot more coming. I want to hear your take. Does this shift the balance, or will defenses find another way to respond? Share this video with someone who needs to see this, especially if they've been following this story closely. Turn on notifications so you're always the first to know when new content drops. If you've got a different perspective, drop it below. I read a lot of the comments and the discussions here are always interesting. Let me know what you think happens next, because this could go in a lot of directions. And if you enjoy content that breaks things down in a simple, engaging way, stick around. There's plenty more on the way. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.